All right, we're live in Yukon, Oklahoma, and we are continuing our lesson in Christ in the Old Testament. So hopefully, if you haven't been able to make it to all the classes, you've got a chance to see it either up on YouTube in the Berean Clubhouse, or we also have it on our Facebook channel for those who like to use Facebook. And today we're going to talk about something that's very, very rare in our study. So let's move forward here. Let me click on that. Yeah. Okay, so far we did Adam, Noah, Abraham, Rebecca, Melchizedek, Joseph last week, and this week we're doing Asenath.
How do you say his name?
It's a girl, Asenath, or it could also be Asenath. She's got two pronunciations, but Asenath, Asenath. All right. So how many of you have had an opportunity to know something about this woman? One person in a room. Okay, so we got less than 1%. All right. That's what I say is rare. Okay. So I'm hoping that what you come across today, you'll think, oh my gosh, I got to go back and read more about this story, because she is a very unique woman. And rarely are there any preachers up on a stage telling you stories of her life, because it requires a whole lot of research. Okay, it's not an easy story to tell. So, we have talked about Abraham, and then we went to Joseph. Joseph was last week. She is married to Joseph. Yes. So, we remember in the sons of Jacob, the tribes of Israel, we came down on Rachel's side to Joseph, and then Joseph has two kids, the Manasseh and Ephraim, and they are her children. She's the mother of them. So I think that you'll enjoy this story. First, a little bit about Egyptian women, though, because we oftentimes don't really know much about their culture. So Egyptian women enjoyed freedoms that were not available in most other nations during this period of time. For example, they could buy and sell property. Didn't need their husband. They could do it themselves. Buy and sell property. They can serve on a jury. They can even help write wills. And they can become doctors and priestesses. They earn equal pay for doing the same job as a man. Oh. It was required by Egyptian law. There was no getting around that. So I thought you'd think this would be interesting. And they have the right to choose or refuse a husband, could divorce and remarry. Very progressive Egyptian culture. And there were 3 Egyptian pharaohs that were women. I can't pronounce their names. But, so 3 Egyptian women pharaohs, which is pretty cool. All right. So she is in a group that is like that. She's an aristocrat. What? You had a question, Kent?
Were they called pharaoh, or were they called?
They're called pharaohs. Because so as I said last week, the word pharaoh does not mean king. It's a title. It means the house of the old or royalty. And so eventually it was the name that was used for the place where the palace was, but over time it evolved to being the title of the actual king over Egypt. So they would call him Pharaoh. And it didn't matter if it was a woman or a man, they were both called Pharaoh. All right? So, and then this is Nefertiti's, if you've ever heard of her name before. Very famous. You can see the headdress. And so I thought you might find this fascinating, because Asenath is a black woman. She's from the tribe, the Ham tribes, and she is a woman who, her story is found in Genesis 41, starts at verse 15. And we know that she had ebony colored skin, black, and she was considered to be one of the most beautiful women in Egypt. She's 18 years old when she meets Joseph, and she is a virgin, and that every man in the country are trying to get her to marry them. she, at one point, it was going to be looking like she's going to marry the son of the Pharaoh because she's an aristocrat, and the son of the Pharaoh was trying to court her. We find out that she becomes the Egyptian wife of Joseph, and she's the daughter of a high priest called Potipharah, and they come from On. And On is Heliopolis, is the city of the sun.
So was he a high priest to one of the gods, or was he a high priest to
These are pagans. He's a high priest to the god Ra. Or they pronounce it Ray, but it's R-A.
And isn't he the sun god?
He's the sun god. So this is their home city. So she's the daughter of the high priest. And we'll learn a little bit more about that. I'm going to break it down. We're going to go further. I'm giving you a summary right now so you're ready to organize your notes. And she's the mother of the twin boys, Manasseh and Ephraim. You know there's a lot of twins in that family. Have you realized that yet? You know, you got lots of twins. So my mom is a twin, and my dad is a twin. We have no twins in our family.
Yes.
It has skipped. So potentially, my daughter or my son may have twins. They're older. I know. They're older siblings, Jeremy and Brianna. You folks have never met. But the older siblings, they have daughters. There's no twins. So, all right. Well, anyway, so this is the story of Asenath. So, first of all, we have archaeological findings about her. One of the few women that we can go back and have actual real findings. Asenath, in the year 1772 BC, there was an engraving that was done. And the last week I showed you one of the books by a man named Douglas Petrovich on the Hebrew origins. Well, he also has done a book on the world's oldest alphabet. And he's done a video on that as well. And he's an archaeologist. And he was one of the guys who found this slab. And the slab is actually, it says in ancient writing, the house of the vineyard of Asenath and its innermost room are engraved. They have come to life. And what's happening here is that if you saw the palace I showed last week, Joseph's palace area in Avaris, the city, in his area there was an inner court area, and then there was a room inside there that was her special room, and they decorated it with lots of colors all on the walls and things, and they said it came to life. And so this was the slab that was found in that area. Remember now, there was a city built on top of this, which is the city of Ramses. And so the archaeologists have dug underneath that city and found Avaris, the other city where Joseph and his family lived. And so they found this slab there. I thought, oh, cool. They got something that actually has a name on it. Well, so let's go into a little bit more detail about the story. So what does the Bible actually say about her? There's 3 verses. And Genesis 41, verse 45 and 50, and also Genesis 46, verse 20. So this is what they say. These are the quotes. Genesis 41:45 says, Pharaoh gave Joseph the name Zephaniah Paneah, and gave him Asenath, the daughter of Potipharah, the high priest of On, to be his wife. That's a quote from the Bible. And then 5 verses later, in verse 50, it says, before the years of famine came, 2 sons were born to Joseph by Asenath, daughter of Potipharah, priest of On. And then the last time she's mentioned in the Bible is in Genesis 46. In Egypt, Manasseh and Ephraim were born to Joseph by Asenath, daughter of Potipharah, the priest of On. Now here's the test for you. As you've learned by now, there is no accidental words in the Bible. Everything there on purpose. We have 3 verses telling us 3 things about Asenath. Do you see the pattern? 3 verses, 3 things about her. Do you see a pattern?
He says the daughter of the priest every time.
So
It doesn't say that she was saved. Usually it'll say that.
let's move on and see what happens, okay? All right. So let's first understand a little bit more about this mystery. In the Bible, every word has a purpose. You're starting to see a pattern, but did you see the pattern? Did you write down anything to do with the pattern? Then you start to mention some of it. Okay, we'll go a little bit further. Asenath is only present in those 3 verses, and there's a mystery present. In all 3 verses, there are 3 things revealed. Her name, her father's name, and her hometown. All 3 of those are very, very important to her story. Her name, father's name, or who her father is, and the hometown. So we're going to break all 3 of those down. That's how I'm going to approach this. Okay? So the first part is her name. Asenath means who belongs to Neth. N-E-I-T-H. Neth. So Dad, the priest, when he had her born, he named her, she belongs to Neth. Who's Neth?
Wouldn't that be the goddess of the ground?
A goddess of something. Of what, though?
Of the ground.
Not the ground, but I guess you're close. She's the creator of the earth. Okay? Yeah. She is and we'll learn more about her also. We're gonna dig deeper into her. So we have belongs to Neth. Neth is the primary Egyptian goddess of creation who created the universe and governs it. Neth also, this is a hieroglyphic picture of her. She always has on top of her head a tower, a fortress, or some sort of crown. You might see her also with a red crown, the crown of the Nile. Anyways, she carries an ankh. She's got a scepter. Neth is also called the defender. She's a warrior. So the daughter, Asenath, is being called, you belong to this goddess, you're dedicated to her, and you are a part of her warriorship. Be a warrior woman. So Asenath is not an ordinary girl. Her whole life has been dedicated to this goddess. It's like when a child is born and you give him a Bible name, and then you say you come up in front of the church and you do a dedication. You're saying that you're asking the whole community, all of us in the church here, to support that family and the child growing up in her faith. They did that with her, to the goddess Neth. Not an ordinary story that you would hear about in the Bible. And she's the bearer of the ankh, the key of life. Life comes through the cross. That's what they believed. So what we have here is you have a cross, and then the loop on the top was for holding it, to carry it around. See how she's carrying it? Okay. So the thought was that the Creator brings life through the cross. Oh my gosh. And these are pagans. How do you think they got that idea?
I mean, they were descended from Noah's kids.
They're descendants from Noah's children, and we know the entire story of the Creator dispersed throughout all the 70 nations, but they rebelled against God. And so over time, the stories get twisted, they get things added. The Creator now becomes a woman instead of a man. Satan comes along, tries to do whatever he can. Even though the story's in the culture, he's trying to change that story. So we see a little bit more about that. But I thought you might like to know, how does that come out to today? Where is that in our society now?
And then is it Ra that's the corn god that gets killed and resurrected every year?
No, it's close. That's Horus, but Ra and Horus later they combine those together into the same story. So yes.
Yeah, and then
So
ISIS is.
So there's all kinds of other
Yeah.
twists, and I got a whole book on it, and we don't want to spend all that time on it.
I'm just bringing it up.
But
because
all
that's
these,
another
all the stories,
direction.
let me put it this way. I have a professor that I had when I was working on my master's in religion, and he was a missionary worker who worked in places that had no written languages. Okay, and his job was to create a language. Well, he ended up learning their culture, their history, and every single one of them, he said, the gospel was embedded into their ancient legends. He just had to help reveal it. And so it's like this. So it's not going to be hard for Joseph to help her understand who the real creator is. But as you can see, her whole life is religion, though, all right, so far. And so let's see what's going on for today. Asenath's name has evolved to Athena. Athena, and that's what Athena looks like. I don't know if you guys can see it way back there, but this is a life-size Athena that was located in Athens, inside of the Parthenon. And you know, there's a whole thing of it right now down in Nashville, right? Because there's a duplicate of this in Nashville. And Athena, see how big she is? There's a man standing next to her. And this is life-size of what the one of the seven wonders of ancient history. Well, let's go a little bit further. Columbia. Do you guys know Columbia? Most people don't know that. But that's also the same goddess. And so we have the District of Columbia because Columbia you see all the time when you're watching movies. Okay? The same goddess. But there's one more that really freaks out Americans. The District of Columbia, and we have the Statue of Liberty. It's also the same goddess. Goddess of freedom, and she's a defender. So, a little bit of exposure there. If you want to know more detail about that, you now got a place to start. You can go do some research. But let's go further now. So we got this Asenath, her name, and what about her father? So that it's in all three of them, right? It's got her father's name is also always mentioned. Well, Asenath's father is Pontifera. It's an Egyptian high priest from the town of On. On, by the way, is also known as Heliopolis, the city of the sun. And so his name means he who is dedicated to Re. And Re is spelled R-A. We always pronounce it as Ra in our language. But in Egyptian, they pronounce it as Re. Like R-A-Y, like the sun rays. So he was, the sun. And their part of the myth, their legend, is that the sun god goes up, across, back down, and then goes into the underworld, and then comes back up again. And every day he's recreated, reborn, and every day also the Neth goddess is there to make sure that he's taken care of. She's the defender, and she's also the one who makes sure that everything's governed in order, and that he comes back up out of the grave. So anyways, so this is their religion. His name means he whom Ra or Re has given, and the term priest is used for him, but a priest also means that he's the governor of the Sun City. So the high priest included the role of being governor, and the priest served the gods of the temple, food and water, and saw to other tasks, but his focus is on that God, not on taking care of the people. So he's the governor of the city, but he don't do much for people. It's all about, so she grew up with her dad being the priest in charge of everything, so she would know everything that's going on in that religion also, along with that. And that's why she's named after Neth, and the dad is the high priest. All right, so next part is what about their hometown? That's the third thing that's mentioned all three times, that pattern. It's got her name, her dad, and their home city. So On, it's also known as the Heliopolis, or the city of the sun. This is ancient ruins of that city. It looks like the Parthenon, and so on, but they all are very similar like that. But this is straight from the city. So I went out and found that. And the city of the sun, it's a major city in Egypt, and during the 13th dynasty, which is the time frame we're talking about right now with Joseph, the 13th dynasty of the Pharaoh, it was considered the capital. So the governor of the capital is her dad. Pretty important person. Okay? It was also the primary worship center for the worship of Ra. Took place there at the city of the sun. And so here's a picture of what that guy looks like. The god Ra, or Ra. He always had from the 13th dynasty on, he has the head of like a hawk. Okay? What? A falcon, yeah. A falcon. And so there's a lot behind all that. I don't want to give all the different stories, but it's pretty interesting stuff. Ancient Egyptians worshiped Ra more than any other god, and pharaohs often would connect themselves with Ra in the effort to be seen as the earthly embodiment of the sun of the god of the sun. So now we got this family. We figured them out, right? We know quite a bit about her from just those three patterns that God kept giving us. All right. So what can we learn from this mystery? The three topics have what in common? Religion. Pagan religion. Evil religion. Let me put it that way. Okay, there's a lot going on here. Asenath was raised, dedicated to Neth. Her father was the top priest of the most powerful Egyptian religion, and he was the governor of the capital. Joseph married into a pagan family. They were heavily involved in pagan worship. What's the risk now? How many? Oh, I can't put that number out there. There's a large number. Solomon married a whole bunch of pagan women. What happened to Solomon?
In the Jewish religion, it's a matriarchal society, so the woman is the head of the family. So basically, you would expect that religion, pagan religion, to be the one they follow.
Yeah, so she's saying, since we're recording, I want to repeat this. She's sharing with us in the Jewish culture. The women are they're matriarchal, even though we say the patriarchs, the fathers of the faith, but the women are the ones that run the family. They do all the Bible teaching to their children to a certain age, like until they get to the point where they're ready to do a bar mitzvah or things like that. And she's also bringing out that the Egyptian, how their culture set up, you see the women are very independent and they're leaders. And so he's marrying a woman who is well prepared for being in charge. All right. Her whole life has been aimed toward that. Now we got something special going on though. We have a risk that Joseph may fall to the sin of the paganism. Yeah. So I would bring that out also, that she didn't convert to Christianity. She converted to a believer of Yahweh. Yeah, but I know what you meant though, Yahweh. So, but we see right now, this is happening. So the big question for all of us is, why would God have Joseph do this? To demonstrate that anybody can become a believer. Excellent. Very true. So what we have here is the darkest dark world is Egypt. And Egypt always represents the world that God wants us to stay separate from. But yet God sent Joseph there to become the ruler. Remember, his whole family all bowed down to him in all those visions, those dreams. And he goes there. He's placed in prison. He's sold as a slave when he's 17 years old. This part of the story does not happen until he's 30 years old. So for 30 years, he's been in lots of trouble. been a slave. He's been in prison. No, he was 17. He's 30 now. What did I just now say?
30 years.
Oh, all right. Yeah, you're trying to correct my math at the end. No problem. I'm giving you the right numbers. Okay, so from 17 until 30, he's been in a lot of trouble. He's been a slave multiple times to the point that he became the slave of a very powerful person. And then that powerful person put him in prison for raping his wife. That's what they thought, right? Because remember, the wife lied about that and said that he was a rapist. So he's now in prison. And everybody in the kingdom knows why he's there. Because the wife was an aristocrat. That was a big family. Everybody would know this. He's in prison. He's a really bad guy. And then he has these visions, these dreams. He's able to interpret those. The cupbearer is released. The baker is not. The baker is killed. Later, the Pharaoh now has these dreams that really bothering him, and they call upon Joseph to take care of the interpreting that. Something that's not in the Bible, but the rabbis have the oral traditions, is that Joseph did not want to be released from prison until his name was cleared. So Pharaoh called up all the women. They call it the women of the cut hands, because they made an oath that they would support the woman, even though they all loved Joseph. But they made an oath that they would agree that Joseph attempted to rape her. So Pharaoh called them all up to court. They, including the wife, and he says, "Tell me the truth," because Joseph says he's not coming out of the prison until you clear his name. Did he commit this great sin? And finally, they all confessed no, and then she confessed that she had made it up. So it was a bad stain on her and her husband. And then, because the truth came out, they put the girls, all the women, all these aristocrat women, into prison. They let Joseph out, and Joseph then said, "I'm not going to, I don't want you to hurt them or keep them in prison. God is a God of grace. You need to release them." So all the women got released. So Joseph starts off his whole thing by releasing these women prisoners. This is a part of their oral traditions. And so we got an interesting situation now. Asenath, by the way, because she's being raised and trained to be a leader, and she, at one point, it looked like she was going to marry Pharaoh's son. But when she saw Joseph, she immediately, the oral traditions, she immediately fell in love. And at first she didn't want to meet him because she just thought he was a scumbag, because she heard the stories about how he raped a woman. He's in prison for sexual bad stuff. Well, it turns out when he comes to her house, because the father, the priest here, invited Joseph to come to the house when he was in town gathering all the grain. All right, and so he's gathering the grain. He comes into the house. She sees him and decides she'd like to meet him. She comes down the stairs to meet him. He doesn't even care about her. His focus is on his job, the grain. And he actually tells the father he don't want any women around because they always make a mess of everything. Yeah. And the father says, "Well, Asenath she has everything. She can organize and help you." And he says he don't want that. All right. So she goes back. She leaves the room. It tells us in the rabbi oral traditions, she went back to her room and stayed there and fasted, because she started praying. She's praying in her mind. She's praying to God. Doesn't give us a name in the Hebrew tradition, but she's praying, and she got a vision from the Lord God Almighty. He came and told her, stay faithful. I got a plan for you. During that fasting time. Joseph also got a visit from the Lord God Almighty. Actually, both times here they call it the angel of the Lord. Okay. And to go back to the house in 8 days and give her another chance. So I'm shortening the story. There's a long story here. There's a whole book on it. And so what happens is she comes back down there and they meet again. And eventually they were married, and they were married by Pharaoh, which was highly different and unusual. But the Pharaoh is the one that married them. So this kind of tells you a little bit of the story there. Then we'll get some more into her faith in a little while. Yes. Instead of her dad. Yeah. Yeah. So she's bringing out that in the children's ministry today, they learned about how Jesus was tempted. The devil tempted him. And we also are seeing stories here along the way that Joseph's going through different temptations. And for him at 30 to have remained not married to anybody was quite unusual. Because even when he was a slave, he could have gotten married. All right. And so, and then he had the temptation of the owner of him, tried to pull him into bed. But anyway, so we see there's a lot going on here. Some of these lessons. Let's see what we got here. So she's the mother of Joseph's children. And this is what it says here. Upon the birth of the firstborn son, Joseph called the name of the firstborn Manasseh. For, he said, God has made me forget all my hardship and all my family's house. So he's married to her. It says right before during the famine time is when they finally got married. And his very first son that came out, there's some money on the floor there. The first son that came out, they're twins, is Manasseh. God has forgiven all my hardship. What's happening here is that he's so happy now with Asenath and with and doing the will of God that he is like, okay, all the hardships he's gone through, he's now forgiven. He has forgotten them. That's the word they would use, forgotten, but forgiven. And so he names his son to remind him from that point going forward that he is dedicated to God, and that even though he's got hardship, he overcomes that. And he looks at his son as a part of that sign of being an overcomer. Then the second child is called Ephraim. For God has made me fruitful in the land of my affliction. He's gone through a lot in Egypt, and he knows that no matter what happens, he keeps on prospering. He keeps on being fruitful. So his second son is called, the fruitful bringer. He's the one that reminds him now he's had afflictions, he's had hardships. His family, he doesn't know what's happened to them, but this is now his family, and he's doing the will of God where he's at. He's being an overcomer. He's naming his children in such a way that he would remember and keep reminding himself as they grow up. In case, things happen in the future, he can look to his children as his markers. They're the ones that help him remember. So she is the mom of those. And we know what happens. They both get blessed by Jacob. Jacob adopts them directly to be his own children. We learned that last week. And they get adopted straight in, so they become members of the 12 sons. And we have then, this is how it plays out. This is the map of Israel, and after the 12 tribes came into the promised land, Ephraim and Manasseh, by the way, is the only tribe that's got land on both sides of the Jordan. Look how much he has, a lot. And then Ephraim. And Manasseh is the tribe that had the first king for the northern, when they broke up later, they have a northern and southern kingdoms. And then Ephraim is the, he becomes very important later. And I think I'll bring that story up in a couple other stories later. I don't want to tell all of it right now. But you can see here that she as their mother, and the way she was trained, has prepared her children to be rulers, and they also are very important to the story of how the faith was passed on to the 12 tribes. So, which is interesting because do you know how many other Gentile women are in the Bible that are pretty important? Okay, so I'll name off one, see if you know who she is. Zephora.
Oh, Moses' wife.
She's the wife of Moses, the second wife.
Right.
She's black. And so Miriam, the sister of Moses, got mad that he married a black lady. And she complained about that. And she got leprosy for complaining. See, God's teaching something here. We're all of the same race. And then there was, who's the lady that's from the brothel of Jericho? Rahab. And so we have Rahab. She's in the direct line for. And then the third one that we have is Ruth. Ruth. She was a Moabite, which are the cursed ones. So are you starting to see a picture here of what God's trying to teach us all? All these women represent the church in all the stories. The men are representing types and shadows of Christ. And the women are types and shadows of the bride of Christ. So, Joseph is the spiritual type of Christ. Asenath, spiritual type of the church. She was Egyptian, came out of the world. She's Gentile. She became a believer of Yahweh. She loved Joseph from the moment she first met him, face to face. Prior to that, all the rumors, she did not want to meet this guy. And the world's like that too. A lot of people don't want to meet Christ from all the rumors. But then when they come face to face with Jesus, there's a whole different story. And then she was made to be a member of the family of God. Even though she was a top aristocrat in the Egyptian pagan religion, she became a member of God's family. So there's a lot happening in this story, and she's a great example for us. So if you're interested, Pharaoh and the Kings and Origin of the Hebrews, I told you last week, but this third one is a new one called Joseph and Asenath. And what they are is they're collections of the oral traditions into a single book. And so I only read the first one. I didn't read the rest of them. All right. If you're interested in that third one, it's a PDF. I can put it up on our Facebook page if you'd like to go read that. Yeah, it's a what do they call it? A Google library book that they scanned a book in one of the old libraries and they put it up available for everybody else to read. And so this comes from that. All right. Next week is Moses. So what do you guys think about Asenath?
Her dad has a very similar name to Joseph's owner.
Yeah. So
Are they the same person?
all right. So he's asking the question about Potiphar and the dad with the wife that tried to commit a sin against Joseph, and her father has a name very similar. So some scholars have said that they could be related. Could be the same person or not. They don't think it's the same person because there's too many differences. One is a priest in a city, and the other guy is, well, he's a high-ranking person, but we don't ever really get a description of who he is.
They said he was a captain of the guard
He's a
or something.
captain of guards, but we don't know of where and what guards. And so, but they could have been related by family also because their names are so similar. But most of the conservative scholars say, no, they're not the same people. And just because they have similar names, that happens in all cultures. We all get similar names after a while. There's a whole bunch of Joes, a whole bunch of Sues, and so on. Yeah. Well, if you were Egyptian, you'd probably say, oh, he's got a common name. Yeah. So I did read about that. I thought about bringing it up earlier, but I didn't think it was important. But since you asked about it, I will go ahead and tell you what I know. I know very little.
So in most of this, you're getting from the oral tradition, from the book.
Yeah, we get the three primary things out of the three scriptures, and then so those we know a lot about. We know a lot about what the name means, and what the dad's job is, and what the city is. But the extra stuff I told you, I would tell you. I say it came out of oral traditions. It could just be made up. I don't know. But the three things out of Scripture, they give us a pattern. And the pattern is God will redeem anybody. And even from a religion against him, you could become a believer and come into the family by God's grace. All right.
Couldn't you see that
Hold on. You guys in the back, I can't hear a person talking right here. And you guys in the far back probably can't even tell there's someone talking. Now go ahead.
So the fact that Joseph stayed Jewish,
It makes you want to know
Asenath
more
might
about
be
her. Well, maybe that really tells me
Yeah.
what's happening.
that she's like a gift from God for him remaining so strong in their relationship.
Okay, so she's bringing out something really important. Pharaoh gave her as a gift to him, as a reward for his doing the dream analysis and interpretation. And God used all that. Remember now, there's no accidents here. Before the foundation of the world, God already planned for these two to get married. Okay? So she was already destined to be his bride, and God has given a reward to Joseph and his faith by having a woman who's dedicated to him and dedicated as a helpmeet. She is equal to him because you've already learned that now about the Egyptian culture. So he's already been in that culture for 17 plus years. He would already have adopted the same mindset. So now we got this team. They go on, they rule together for 47 years. Okay? So 47 years, and archaeologists have shown the city and everything I told you about earlier, that they stay together, they grow in their faith, and they become people that spread the good news of Yahweh. And so there's some follow-up pharaohs that happen later, and one of those pharaohs, he was classified as a traitor because he turned to having faith in the one single creator God. And so his name's been stricken out of all the statutes and everything. But it's believed that probably that's the leftover from the seed that was planted by Joseph and also Asenath. Yes?
I'm curious, does it mention her father anymore? Does her father accept her marriage?
Yeah, okay, so the question is about the father accepting marriage and any other stories about them. So the father was very much involved with the grandchildren. The kids were Egyptian, okay? These kids, they grow up in the Egyptian culture. And even though now Jacob comes along, their other grandfather, right? So they got two grandfathers. One is a priest of Re, and one is a believer, a prophet. He's called the prophet in the Egyptian vocabulary, the prophet of Yahweh, the creator. And so they grow up in both of those. But the two sons when they get blessed by their grandfather Jacob, from that point going forward, they're 100% Hebrew in how they do things. So it was an interesting culture clash. Yes.
It's my understanding that Joseph was more involved in Egypt in the famine and stuff than just in gathering the food. It was my understanding that he was quite the engineer, that he developed some irrigation projects and all different kinds of things for Egypt, and I'm thinking that probably came from Athena.
So he's talking about, and I'm repeating it because we want it on the tape. He's talking about how Joseph, later on, after he took on the job as the treasurer in charge of collecting all the grain, he's very, very smart. And with Asenath, he produces these canals off of the Nile, and they produce irrigation areas, and they build up whole new towns of the granaries. So there is a lot of archaeological findings about a man not called Joseph. He's an Egyptian named man of granaries that were built during the 13th dynasty, which is the same time frame as Joseph. So Christian archaeologists say they're the same as Joseph. Non-Christian archaeologists say, no, you're just confusing myths with history. See, but we say that, the story of Joseph is historical. It's not a myth. So yeah, and so she also was very smart as his wife, and I don't have any indications of her mathematical skills, but usually these priests are famous for being mathematicians. And so mathematics is an important part of their magic over the people, And so she probably understood a lot about sacred geometry. It's what they call it, sacred geometry. If you're going to build canals and things like that, you're going to have to know a lot about geometry. All right, yes?
Joseph's two sons, they became tribes of Israel in addition to the 12 tribes.
I'm backing it up for you. I want to show you. All right, so he's asking a question about the two sons. Okay, we have 12 children underneath Jacob. Joseph is removed as a name, and the two sons are placed in there. They get double the blessing. I told you last week that the Reuben was supposed to get the blessing of the firstborn. He blew it because he committed a sin against one of his mothers. And so the next firstborn was under Rachel, which is Joseph. So Jason became the one with the birthright, and so he would get the double portion blessing. Well, when Jacob came to Egypt, he ended up blessing both of Jacob's sons, and he adopted them as his own sons. So now instead of having 12, he's got 14 sons. But one of them, Joseph, backs out, and his two sons take his place as a double blessing.
So that means 13?
Yeah, there's 13. And so Manasseh and Ephraim share. So they're the sharing of, they call them the 12th sons.
Okay, so they're considered one tribe together?
They're one tribe together, but they're separate tribes.
It depends on which section you're reading, because if they're not counting the Levites, they still have 12, because they separate Ephraim and Manasseh.
Levites did not get an inheritance. So the tribes of Levi are not counted. So now you got 12. Okay, so they all change later. If you go to the book of Revelation, some people are missing in the listing of the 12, and some are added. I'll let you go do your own research on that.
Where's Judah? Judah not in this?
Yeah, this is Judith right here. Okay, I don't have the whole map up there, but Judith is where Jerusalem's located.
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
And then Joshua come from Ephraim.
Yeah, I showed him earlier. If we go all the way back to the very beginning, we'll see the genealogy. I know. Blah, 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 blah.
So that would make Joseph.
Hang on. Wait until we get to where you asked the question before you start talking again. All right. So now do you see Joshua? Joshua's underneath Ephraim. So he came from Asenath.
So that would also make Joshua Egyptian.
None of these are Egyptian. They're all Hebrew. All right. Any other questions? All right. I'll close this in prayer then. Father, thank you for this fun day, and bless how we apply this to our lives. May we always remember your mercy and your grace overcomes all other troubles that we have. May we walk in your overcoming abilities in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen.